And you're saying the same thing happened in '08 when you saw Lehman going bust, a few others almost going bust, and you're like, okay, this is just happening again, except now it just happens bigger.
When I saw it in 1998, sorry, when I saw it in 2008, I wasn't even reading all the story. Like, I know this movie. I know how this ends. And but yeah, Lehman, sure, big deal. But go back again, this goes back to what I said about 98. It started in 97. These markets are so large, the scale of the system is so large that it can take a year to play out. You have to understand the dynamics to understand that. And most people on Wall Street don't, because they're using badly flawed models and regressions and normal distributions of risk. I said none of that. It's all garbage, but that's what people use. But if you understand complexity theory and complex system dynamics, you also understand that it takes a while to play out. An avalanche starts with a snowflake and ends up burying a village. You're supposed to be looking for the snowflake. And in 1998, 2008, that started in 2007, August 2007. There were two Bear Stearns hedge funds that went, illiquid, basically, suspended redemptions and closed their doors, and a money market fund at one of the big French banks, Societe Generale. But that was not Bear Stearns itself. They were the Bear Stearns hedge funds. Bear Stearns didn't bail them out. Typical Bear Stearns. Believe me, Bear Stearns refused to participate in the 1998 bailout of long-term capital. So when they went down in 2008, I promise you, no tears were shed on Wall Street, because that was like, what goes around comes around. It was the attitude. But so that was the start. But remember, Bear Stearns itself failed in March 2008. Then by June, it was Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac. And then in August, the Congress passed a bailout law for Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. I was advising the John McCain campaign at the time, and I was on a call, and they were like all high-fiving, like, yeah, the crisis is over. Congress bailed out Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. We can get back to talking about the war in Iraq, because that's what we really want to talk about. And I, skunk at the garden party, I said, guys, you're not going to make it to election day without this getting much, much worse. I didn't say, September 15th, Lehman Brothers, although everyone knew Lehman was the weak link. I mean, that was true in 98. That was always true on Wall Street. They were always the weak link. But I said, you are not going to make it to election day without an exponential increase in this crisis. So why don't you get ready for that now? Write your speech, have a 4-point plan. It doesn't matter what the points are, just have them, and put your guy on the steps of Treasury and reassure the American people you'll win the election. I was laughed at, not invited back. I'm used to that. And then when it came, McCain runs around like a chicken with his head off, barging into the White House, demanding an emergency meeting. Well, Bush says, well, I can't invite McCain in without inviting Obama in, which he had to do. He didn't want to pick sides in the campaign. And there was a cabinet meeting, and Obama didn't know anything either, but he was smart enough to keep his mouth shut. And McCain's running around. So American people looked at that and they go, you're nuts. You kind of look calm, cool, and collected. If you look at the polls, they reversed. Obama was behind until Lehman. And then after Lehman, and days later, Obama went ahead in the polls. So that was a turning point in the election. But it's, and then so getting back to 2008. So when Lehman came up in September, it was September 15, 2008, that was like the fourth domino, not the first. Everyone remembers it. Oh, that all fell apart after Lehman. Well, it did, but you could see that coming a year away. And Morgan Stanley was days away from collapsing. Goldman would have been right behind it. Then probably Citi, whether JP Morgan would have been the last guy standing, don't know. But there were many more dominoes to fall. And that's when Bernanke and Hank Paulson walked over to the White House and said, we got to do something. And they did. What they did is overnight, they converted Morgan Stanley and Goldman Sachs into bank holding companies. Now, I've been a securities lawyer and bank lawyer for decades. And when you do applications to the Fed, depending on the politics, it can take a couple of years to get something like that approved. This was done like in a day. But the reason it was done was that the Fed could bail them out. Once they were bank holding companies, the Fed had the statutory authority to bail them out. They did. Then things calmed down and we had a bad recession. And AIG was another wild card in the deck. But my point is a couple of points. Number one, you can see these things coming if you know where to look, but most people don't. Number two, they take a while to play out. So you get plenty of warning. But again, people ignore the warnings. And then finally, and it's important to understand there's a difference between a financial crisis and a recession. They're both bad, but they're two different things. 1998 was a severe financial crisis, but there was no recession. I mean, the NASDAQ hit an all-time high on January 1st, 2000. It went on for another year and a half, and there was no recession. 1990, 91 was an example of a recession, but no financial crisis. Some losses in commercial real estate, but there was no financial panic. 2008 was both. 2020 was a severe economic contraction. It's technically a recession, but it's kind of hard to know what it was. It's like, Anthony Fauci shut down the U.S. economy. So what is that? Yeah, GDP fell 32% in one quarter. Technically, sorry, 2 quarters. Technically, it was 2 quarters, but it was really 2 months, March and April 2020. But March happened to be in the first quarter, April was in the second quarter, so it took both quarters down. But that was really concentrated in about 2 months, and then it, kind of came roaring back. But I call it a severe recession, contraction. But there was no financial panic in 2020. The stock market went down 30%, but it like doubled from there. So these things can come together, and we're almost certainly in a recession now. The recession will get worse. So that's not priced into the markets, but you don't even have to guess. That's here. It's going to get worse. The question is, are we in for a financial panic? That's kind of what you were referring to, Brian. And the evidence is yes. The evidence is right in front of your face if you know where to look, but most people don't. It's a little bit technical. I can explain it in plain English, but the signs are there.